Hi and welcome to another gaming video, and in today's video I want to talk about how heavy the Nintendo Switch OLED is. So after nearly 2 years of owning a Switch Lite, the one thing other than the size that I noticed when I upgraded to my OLED is the weight. And it might sound a bit of a daft thing, but just picking it up, you notice how heavy it is. Playing it for any length of time, you really do notice the sort of weight in your hands. And maybe that's because I'm used to smaller consoles. I came from a Switch Lite, but it really is a bit of a hefty beast. Look, just feeling it now, it's got some weight to it. So I thought I would have a look at some figures. So the OLED Switch is 53% heavier than a Lite. So the Lite is 275 grams, the OLED is 420 grams. So there's a 50% difference. It's 50% heavier than a Lite. It is only 5% heavier than a regular Switch, because the OLED Switch is slightly heavier than the original, but that's a big chunk. 50, 55, 53% heavier this is than a Switch Lite, and you can really kind of feel that. But let's talk about the Switch 2 just for a moment there. So the Switch 2 is 538 grams. That makes it 96% heavier than a Switch Lite. That is almost making the Switch 2 twice as heavy as a Switch Lite. That's quite impressive. It is only 35% heavier than a regular Switch and only 28% heavier than the OLED Switch. But I haven't had a hands-on with the Switch 2. All I can imagine is if I'd gone from my Switch Lite straight to a Switch 2, the weight difference would be absolutely insane. And that is with the Joy-Cons attached. So it is a little bit different. I don't actually have figures on how much a Joy-Con weighs, but that's a fair chunk. These have got a little bit of weight to them. I mean, you need a bit of weight to them if you're using them in your hands, but they're comfortable to use. I wouldn't feel like, oh, I've got to put these down after a little while because they're too heavy. But it really was just one of the things that struck me about using an OLED. Now, I've had my OLED a few weeks now, and it isn't an issue. I'm not saying that the weight of the Switch is a problem. In fact, in some ways, it is quite nice. It gives you that you've got something solid in your hand. But after using a Switch Lite for 2 years, it really was something that I'd noticed. So the OLED Switch is 53% heavier than a Lite. The original Switch is 47% heavier than the Lite, and the OLED is 5% heavier than the regular Switch. The Switch 2 is a heavy beast, at least on paper. It is 96% heavier than a Switch Lite, 35% heavier than a Switch, and 28% heavier than an OLED Switch. So, yeah, just a short little video, and it really was. I mean, the OLED is amazing. So the first thing that grabs you when you pick an OLED up, especially if you've had a Lite, is it's huge. The screen is huge. The whole console feels very large. But the second thing that hit me was that it's got a considerable amount of weight to it. And yeah, it's about 50% heavier than a Switch Lite. Link, like, subscribe, enjoy.